A paper published back in April detailed that a alarmingly large amount of people on the political left side of the aisle were more and more comfortable with violence against their political adversaries, namely Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And this has caused a lot of people to speculate about the rise of a sort of assassination culture that could be confronting America. And I think that this assassination culture is not only very real, it is a fundamental moral threat to American civilization. So in this video, my friends, we're going to actually look at an anatomy of assassination culture. I've not really seen someone try to anatomize it and try to go through its different parts. We're going to go through the different principles and ideas it reflects. And I'm going to explain to you why it's not only a moral threat to America, why I think every rational person, regardless of where their political temperature is, regardless if they are upset with the system or they are fine with it, should reject it, and they should pursue other, more civilized means of handling disagreement in civil society. But before we get to that, my friends, hope all of you are doing well. I am Christian Watts. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy political and social commentary with a philosophical bent, then I must implore you, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Do whatever you can, my friends, to ensure our message is successful. My friends, we are building a project of civic revivalism here. If you want to revive the intellectual foundations of America that included ideas like natural law, reason, civil society, justice, so on and so forth, then I would encourage you to, again, like, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys so much. Now, please enjoy the video. So, assassination culture. A study from the Network Contagion Research Institute essentially surveyed a bunch of different people on the political left, and they found a disturbing trend in the support of political violence. So, quoting from a news report that looked at the study, it says, quote, "To assess support for political violence, all 1,264 residents surveyed were asked to classify their political ideology, and 38% of total respondents said it would be somewhat justified to do an unspeakable thing to President Trump, to take his life, while 31% said the same about Elon Musk. However, those self-identifying in that group who were more left-leaning, the numbers then grew to 48% and 55%. And one of the people who conducted the study said, I quote, "People are feeling an era of authoritarianism, not an era of persuasion or of calm negotiation. Temperatures are rising." Another person who conducted this study said, quote, "The rules of the game, how you conduct politics normally, have been thrown out, and it's every man for himself." So the researchers seem to be suggesting that due to the current temperature of the air, we are entering a period where violent politics, factional politics, I would even call it, is becoming justified simply because of how people are feeling. But feelings can be hijacked by propaganda and manipulations of information. Feelings and sentiment can be hijacked to push people towards all kinds of different things. Look at the great authoritarian regimes of the world. All of them weaponize sentiment and weaponize the sense of injustice that is a part of the human moral sense. They corrupted the moral sense to funnel energy into a project that was both an affront to justice and an affront to the moral sense and an affront to morality, but they dressed it up as if it was some kind of moral project. So this is basically how propagandists and authoritarians work. So we have to ask ourselves, why in the world are people feeling this way? Are they feeling it because they are objectively assessing the facts of the administration and they are getting the full picture and they are making a dispassionate analysis of those facts? Or are they doing it because they have a certain premise in their head and everything in the world must conform to their premise? The premise must not conform to the world, which then makes them an enemy of reality and also makes them a carrier of bad knowledge, of bad epistemology. Now, food for thought. But I think one of the things, my friends, that this kind of reflects is that assassination culture does not begin with politics. It begins with a human urge, a human feeling, and it ends up manifesting in a political form. So assassination culture is not a political phenomenon or solely a political phenomenon. It is a moral phenomenon that shows up in political ways. So there have been several examples of this kind of culture being acted out as well. So for example, Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, someone attempted to take his life, and that person was clearly unwell, but that person also had some very interesting ideas about politics. They were aligned with the political left, and they had a very radical take about things, and it was their premise basically taking in everything rather than that their premise fitting the world. The two assassination attempts on Donald Trump, first by the guy in Butler, Pennsylvania, who tried to take his life. We still don't really know why that happened. It's still really much a mystery, which is, I think, is very interesting, because I think that Now the resources of the federal government are all marshaled under the Trump administration. We should at least have some kind of answer, in my opinion. I'll leave that for the people to speculate on why that is. Then, of course, Ryan Ruth, who tried to take his life the second time, who was a known supporter of Ukraine and all kind of different causes that the political left has an affinity towards. These were cases, again, of idealism overtaking reason, and overtaking observation, overtaking the core social principles, and converting the people who held these idealistic ideas into weapons of a sort of torturous project, so to speak. Now, I think one of the best intellectual rationalizations of an assassination culture, even though I totally disagree with it, I think it's absolutely incorrect, but one of the best, if you want to understand someone who might think assassination culture is justified, comes from Nicholas Decker, who is a grad student who wrote a paper back on April 16th that actually went viral, titled, "When Must We Kill Them?" And the thesis of this paper is that the current administration has gone so far that we have to begin considering if violence should be a recourse to address our grievances with them. I'll quote this paper. He says, quote, "Evil has come to America." Let me stop. Whenever somebody tells you that evil has come to any place or something is evil, whenever someone brands a phenomenon as evil, expect them to have some kind of justification behind that not only explains what their conception of evil is, but also explains how the evil is manifesting in accordance with that conception. It's easy to call something evil. When I use evil in my videos, I have a backing of moral philosophy in it. I don't just say, that's evil, because that's simply a sentiment. That's not an argument. Sentiments are just pure emotional expression manifest in reality. Arguments are structured statements about something in reality that have two premises and have a conclusion and are backed by reason. Sentiments can be present in arguments, but arguments oftentimes are not present in sentiments. Just food for thought. Going on, quote, "Evil has come to America. The present administration is engaged in barbarism. It has arbitrarily imprisoned its opponents, revoked the visas of thousands of students, imposed taxes upon us without our consent, and seeks to destroy the institutions which oppose it." Well, first of all, taxation is a phenomenon that's been universal throughout American politics in some way, shape, or form, whether it be the tariffs of the 19th century or whether it be income taxes of the 20th century. That is something that is not unique to this administration. It is not barbaric to revoke a visa. A visa is a privilege that is extended to people that are not native to the country to come in and be here for a little bit. That's not barbaric. That is simply an exercise of privilege. And evidently, it has not imprisoned its opponents because many people are writing articles like this and protesting, and there's thousands of people protesting across the country, so on and so forth. But I'm going through this for a reason, and it's going to be very important because this kind of underlies the problem we're facing here. Continuing, "Its leader has threatened those who produce unfavorable coverage and suggested that their license should be revoked. It has deprived us in many cases of trial and jury. It has subjected us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and has transported us beyond seas to be imprisoned for pretended offenses. It has scorned the orders of our courts and threatens to alter fundamentally our form of government. It has pardoned its thugs and extorted the lawyers who defended its opponents." When you speak in such broad strokes without providing any kind of evidence or without having a grounded, concrete argument, it's very easy, again, to flame the sentiments of those that agree with you and flame those that disagree with you and cause no intellectual or no rational observation to happen in between those two opposing camps, which is precisely the author's intention. He should be ashamed of himself. His essay is an exercise in sort of anti-intellectual, anti-rational discourse. It's an exercise in an argument that is disconnected from any sense of society, it's disconnected from any sense of human nature, it's disconnected from any kind of moral system, and relies solely upon outrage. He should be ashamed of himself, especially as a grad student. Oh my goodness, you should know that you should not make arguments like this. You should make arguments that are a little bit more defined. There are plenty of people that do that. They don't agree with this current administration. All I ask that you make your arguments sensible. But he's besides the point. The point is, I think these things, the assassination attempts on Shapiro and Trump, and this grad student writing the paper, all kind of create an anatomy of assassination culture. Assassination culture begins as a resentment towards someone, so pure sentiment, framed as moral urgency. So a resentment that takes the appearance of a kind of rational concern and can therefore be justified as good and needed by most people. So it's not mere resentment, because mere resentment can easily be dismissed as anger, but it's resentment plus an accommodating worldview. Then there is resentment plus an accommodating worldview plus a rejection of rationality. Now, when I say rationality, I mean all the things that go into that container we call the mind that allow us to understand the world. That's just not our thinking, but that's also our will. That's also our knowledge. That's also our ability to apply our will to the world to understand things. So reason is not just thinking. Reason is also acting. Reason is also observing. So there's like a container that contains so many different things. But there's also not just irrational. It's divorced from civic virtue. So reason is one thing, but I can use my reason to justify anything, which is why reason alone is not the sole moral faculty for us to be concerned about. Reason is one of the core ones, but reason must reinforce our sociability, our inherent social nature, and the sociability creates ethics, which is simply the rules that govern how we interact with other people. Therefore, reason must be a handmaid both to sociability, to ethics, which both come together to produce what? Civic virtue, the act of being moral and well to your fellow citizens. Assassination culture rejects civic virtue and says, no, you can do a certain action based off of the resentment and the urgency that you have, and based off of this perception that you have, even if it's just mere sentiment. So that's very important to understand as well. So assassination culture is resentment plus an accommodating worldview that is based off of sentiment, plus a rejection of rationality, plus a rejection of civic virtue, combined with some urgent event. And the urgent event in both the cases of the Shapiro assassin and the Ruth and the crook who tried to assassinate Trump, they believed that something bad was going to happen if Trump became president. And the grad student obviously believes something bad is going to happen if he continues to be president. Therefore, that's the sense of urgency that pushes the assassination culture right over the edge. So assassination culture, my friends, is a phenomenon that places the vicious principles of our nature, primality, violence, anger, emotionalism, over the social principles, particularly fidelity, the act of being loyal to those who you have a connection with and being loyal to those who are within communication and within society with you. Veracity, the act of not just being truthful, but embodying the requirements that it takes to be truthful. Lord Comey says in one of his essays that if you're going to understand the world, you're going to have any sense of understanding what you see when you observe things, you have to have both veracity, which is the truth, but you must also have the disposition, he calls it the disposition to trust others. Because one of the ways that we form our thoughts and ideas is by reading information that comes from outside of us. Therefore, there's a world outside of us. And that also requires a degree of trust. Now, trust but verify, of course. Don't just believe things blindly. That's how we get the tyranny of the expertise coming in. But still, you have to have a key part of knowledge is a disposition to trust others. So these are social principles because they allow society to exist. They allow human interaction to actually happen. The moment resentment comes in, the moment and this sense of urgency comes in and overtakes the disposition to trust others, overtakes fidelity, overtakes veracity, is the moment we become less than human. We actually become inhuman in our behavior because we are no longer doing things that are fundamentally human. We now become primitive. We now become primal, and therefore we become a threat to any sense of correctness and goodness that exists. And so the moralization of violence is actually a direct consequence of this kind of thing, because you see that in that essay, for example, that violence is justified as being necessary to protect people, to protect something that might be laws. So the moralization of violence is the consequence of isolating man from the moral conduct of society and then placing him in this context that is dominated by these totalizing vicious principles. By basically, what assassination culture does is basically convinces you to reject your nature in pursuit of a cause. And then by doing so, it convinces you that you're going to have some kind of fulfillment, some kind of self-fulfillment, some kind of glorious outcome that'll be benevolent and be justified. And that, my friends, is precisely where its danger is, because when you can rationalize an immoral behavior, you become a threat to everybody because you are convinced by your own righteousness. Thinking themselves wise, they became fools, as the ancient scriptures said about a group of people that had this same kind of problem. So this culture rises from a rejection of the humanity of others, but also a rejection of the social virtues that arise from man's nature. It requires human beings to unmake themselves, to unmake especially their civilized understanding and their civilized acculturation, I would call it, and cast their mind in the manner of a beast, in the manner of an animal, so to speak. Assassination culture, and this leads me to my last point here, is a relic of primitive man. So there are three stages of man. There is primitive man, there is barbarian man, and there's civilized man. Primitive man basically discovered fire, lived in the caves, lived a life of subsistence, did not really try to create, not try to understand or rationalize. He adapted to his environment, whereas his environment did not adapt to him. And so primitive man only understood violence. He couldn't really speak that well, didn't really understand a lot of things. He had no structured understanding. He was essentially a savage in every way, in every sense of the word. Barbarian man went beyond subsistence, used fire to create a structure that society could exist in without being constantly assailed by the raw elements of nature. But he still clung to violence. He still clung to basic subsistence things. He still clung to hunting and gathering by hand, as opposed to finding ways that would actually make it easier for him to not just live, but also to go beyond just living, to flourish, so on and so forth. So barbarian man was still of a mind that was really, really rudimentary, even though he was once of a primitive man. Civilized man decided not just to conform to his environment, but to make his environment conform to him. And out of that rose society. Out of that rose civil society, I should probably say. Out of that rose civilization, because obviously primitive society existed, but civil society is the ultimate fulfillment of human ability to interact and to socialize and to associate, so on and so forth. Well, assassination culture is a relic of primitive man, because tribes were the dominant form of social organization during the age of primitive man. Tribes were how tribes, both primitive and barbarian man, tribes were the main ways in which they organized. But organizing in small tribes, small unit tribes, having no interaction with a lot of people outside of that, is going to create a very different moral framework in your mind than having connection with people that are outside of your small tribe. Because now morality is not a matter of who is your friend and who is your enemy, so to speak. Morality is now a matter of, okay, how can I maintain this social structure while pursuing fundamentally human principles that reflect my individuality, that reflect the dignity and the worth of others? Well, I have to have universal ideas. I have to have veracity. I have to have truth. I have to have fidelity. I have to have justice. I have to be willing to respect my neighbor's possessions, so on and so forth. But I also must understand that not all good behavior comes from force. Some good behavior comes from the heart, and so some things should be separate from the realm of law, which is the distinction between the private and the public realm, so on and so forth. These distinctions don't happen when you're primitive. They can't, because you have not developed the language, the tools, the intellectual tools to get you beyond the state of primal violence. And assassination culture downgrades us from civilized to primitive, and is therefore a rejection of the progress we have made as a human species out of subsistence and into flourishing. Assassination culture is mediocrity approved and stamped upon with the signage of some kind of crude moral virtue. It is not good. It is bad in every way, and it is a moral threat to our civilization as Americans. America is fundamentally a moral civilization because America is based off a set of principles and axioms that can be adopted by anybody, but that are fundamentally unique to our context in political history. Assassination culture threatens our uniqueness by downgrading it from actually mattering to replacing it with a system that the old world had already had for so many different years. My friends, extreme tribalism is not natural to man. People say tribalism is natural to man. This is a different day, but extreme tribalism is not natural to man, because man is fitted for society. And to be fitted for society, you must be fitted for cooperation. And tribalism and cooperation don't go hand in hand. Maybe in a very small, insular sense, but not in a general sense. And so we have to understand that tribalism is the root of this. And the sooner we reject tribalism, the sooner we reject that kind of crude insularity of human understanding, the sooner we embrace moral education, and the sooner we understand the humanity of other people, the sooner we understand, of course, the nature of politics, which is not to simply have power or violence. It's to pursue good governance beyond that, which allows complex systems to exist. The sooner we recognize all these things, my friends, the sooner and better our society will be. And the sooner and better malevolent sentiments like assassination culture will not be the governing principles in people's minds. That should be the society we try to strive towards, the America we strive towards. And we can only do so, however, by reevaluating our premises, lowering the temperature, and rejecting malevolence for benevolence. My friends, like, share, comment, subscribe. Join our Discord, my friends. We are creating a movement of thinkers. And of course, if you want to get involved in talking about philosophy with any of us, with me, my community members, please get involved in our Discord. Donate to me if you would like to. Locals, PayPal, Patreon, all good places. That'll be in the comment section down below. My friends, study history, study philosophy. Remain more convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.